Hello. This particular lecture is part of Module 3, where the assignment is to either apply to graduate school or to look for a job. And those two are not mutually exclusive, by the way. So, if you're a psychology major taking this class, this will be the assignment that you will do, and the others have a choice. And I hope that it splits 50-50 for the good of the class so that we can discuss um, what you come up with both ways. But this particular lecture, whether you are going to do the application to graduate school or not, will have some information that you will like. And those of you in the traditional class who are listening to this, for example, to make up an assignment or something, we will have a day when somebody's going to come in, a recent student who's applying to graduate school, and he can give you the most up-to-date information on the process. I applied to graduate school in 2012, and that was my last experience, and things change over time, processes, but I think the information is in here is going to be as up-to-date as possible for um, the process of applying to graduate school, and specifically for master's programs. Now, some of you may be applying to programs that are um, combination master's and PhD programs, but most of you would be applying for master's programs. So we're going to look at foundational questions that you have to ask yourself, then the processes, the written documents you have to deal with, and then the issue of the interview. And you might be saying this sounds like very much like the lecture on the job search, and yes, it is, because it's a very similar process. When I talk about laying the foundation, I think you have to ask yourself, why are you going to graduate school in the first place? Why is this a goal? If it's something that you've thought about for a long time, maybe because you want to be in an academic setting, or you want to do the kind of job that requires graduate school, that's one thing. But if you're just now starting to think about it, that's another thing. You have to think about, is this degree necessary to meet your career and life goals, and will it help your employability? And you might say, well, of course it will help my employability. Well, maybe, maybe not. There may be other things that would make you more marketable than just getting a master's degree in a certain field. So you need to understand the market. You need to understand the field you're in, the discipline, etc. And that's not meant to discourage anybody from getting a master's degree, because I think ultimately you will want to do that, because it does really help you understand your discipline a whole lot more, and you just focus on your discipline in graduate school. But it may be that you're a little burned out with school. It may be that you're not financially where you need to be. It may be that you're planning on marriage, and or you have small children, and various things, so that the decision to go ahead and go to graduate school immediately after college may not be the best one for you. And nowadays people don't just go to college when they're at a certain age. People go to college and take classes throughout their life. And I think I'm the primary example. I didn't start my second doctorate. I started one when I was 50 and didn't finish it, but I didn't start the real one until I was 56. And some of you are probably rolling your eyes, but it's I don't recommend that, but people do that now. I wasn't the oldest person in my program, so it's not something you have to do right out of school. So there's reasons to, there's reasons not to. You have to look at, are you limited geographically? And we're not really, except that it depends. If you want to get, say, a master's degree in certain fields, you would have to move to Atlanta, or be able to be there. And then, of course, there's online programs as well that are an option. That those have their good points. They have their bad points. You have to ask yourself, are you ready for the rigors of graduate school? Now, take your hardest undergraduate course and multiply it a few times. And I'll say this now, there's an old movie, maybe you've seen it, called A League of Their Own, And there's a famous line in the movie where Tom Hanks says, um, "There's no crying in baseball," because he's dealing with a team of women during the 1940s when everybody was off at war, the men were off at war, so the women were playing baseball. It was really just kind of a gimmick. And he says, "There's no crying in baseball." Well, there's no remediation, there's no tutoring in graduate school. You walk in, the professor might say, "Okay, by next week you need to have read this whole book, or these 2 books, or these 3 books," is what happened to me. And you say, "Are you serious? I can't read it." Well, no, you don't read every single word, but you have to learn how to read a book and understand the argument and get that book's content uh, in a week. So you really need to be ready for that, and it's going to be much harder than you are used to in most undergraduates, so you need to be aware of that. Um, and do you know what you're getting into financially? There is no Pell or Hope. You can get a loan. It's going to take more time than your typical undergraduate course, and there will be other resources that you'll have. The books are more expensive, and they just, it's assumed if you are going to graduate school that you are willing to be a professional and make the sacrifices necessary to get that degree. Now, when it comes to choosing a graduate school and a program, um, to some extent that might already be chosen for you, but there are basically 2 types. There's disciplinary ones where you get an MA or an MS, and then there are professional or scholar practitioner programs, like a Master's of Business Administration, a Master's of Public Administration, or a Master of Education. And these differ in, of course, having to do with the discipline that you're studying, and also what it might lead to as far as doctoral work. For example, if you had an MED, it would probably be difficult to go into a PhD program directly. They would that kind of thing. So that's going to be a question. And then, what about the reputation? Well, you got to do your research, and this may require a visit. It may require interviewing students and grads. It may require looking at a lot of websites, and specifically look at the professors that are teaching in that program. Are they publishing in their field? Go into Galileo, find their names, go into Galileo, find out what they're publishing, what they research, because that's what they do. They might teach 1 or 2 classes a year, and they research, and probably run some sort of an institute or a program or something. Are they specializing in a subject you want? So, and then there's always the power of networking and mentoring. That's why you have professors here. Often, I know this happened for me in the 70s, and it still happens, that the professors you have in your undergraduate often help you connect with former professors they've had in their doctoral or master's programs. So the power of networking and mentoring is very important. So, and you can follow that link for some more information. You need to also ask whether the program you're going into will affect later admission to doctoral work or teaching. For example, you might say, well, I want to teach in college and I want to get this MED, and no, it's probably not what you want to do. An MED is for high school teachers who want to get a higher pay. That's not probably what you want to do. You would want to get a master's degree in that discipline. So you'll be limited in terms of what you can do later. You also want to look at graduate assistantships that might be available. Now, of course, the problem with that is, or the issue with that is that you have to be there physically. It's not a place you can commute to or do online if you're a graduate assistant. Is this the right time for you? If you just had a baby, it may not be the right time for you. If you know there's someone very sick in your family that you're going to have to take care of, I'm kind of the opinion, don't make life worse for yourself. In my case, you can't predict everything, of course. I started my doctoral work in May of 2000. 12, and that same month, later that month, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and started chemo and eventually passed away. So that was concurrent with my doctoral work. Not, but of course I didn't know that. That was not something I could, plan. Um, and then, ultimately, what do you expect from this program? And that goes back to laying the foundation. Why are you doing this? So if it sounds like I'm being negative, I just want to uh, do a reality check. I think graduate school is great. I have 3 graduate degrees. It's the most fantastic thing I've ever done. I got great education, but I wanted to teach in a college, and that's what I do. Um, it may be that you need to get some experience in the kind of work you want to do, and then see where you really want to go with the issue of graduate work. So here, and you can stop this and check these links out. Um, this is a link to the University of Tennessee's School of Education and a specific program in school counseling. And I chose UT because it's out of state, and I realize most people here would choose to go in-state to Georgia for obvious reasons. But um, if you go to this site, what you'll see is that, for example, they have an institute about school counseling, and a lot of times graduate schools will have this. It'll be some sort of a program where the professors work and they have access to the community and things along that line. But be prepared to dig around to find what you need. I don't want to sound too negative, but the graduate schools aren't as helpful as, say, a place like Dalton State. I mean, Dalton State exists to get people in the door and we're access institution. So we go out of our way to recruit and make the website easy. And you might say, no, we don't, but we do. When you apply to graduate school, it's not going to be hard, but it's not going to be easy either to find all the information. They assume you're an adult. You're going to look for it. You're going to dig. You're going to do the research, those kinds of things. So this would be a good link to go to, dig around to find out the kinds of information that you would want to know. For example, deadlines. What documents do they need? Do they need the GRE? Who are their professors? What do they focus on? Another reason I chose this one is that one of their professors, I used a lot of his work in my dissertation. His name is Ralph Brockett. So that's the kind of thing you're looking at. A little bit of wisdom here. You may have come to Dalton State because at that time in your life you felt it was your only option. Please do not approach graduate school like that. You have other options, and it's going to be expensive and time consuming, a big part of your life, and you don't want to go into it without knowing what you're doing. And you do have options, so don't feel like a victim. A second point of wisdom too is you might ask about, what about private schools like an Emory or a Vanderbilt or those are 2 big ones around here. I mean, if you can get in there and you can afford them, those are going to have extremely high reputations, but they are going to be a whole lot more expensive and less likely to give you assistantships or anything like that. So so that's the give and take. Also, many of them have doctoral programs that you can segue into, as do many state schools. Now, on the issue of the for-profits, the Phoenix, the Strayer, the Bryant, the Capella, Walden, those kind of places, you do not want to talk to me about that. I have a basic bias against them, so I'm not a good source. You need to just go to somebody else for advice on them. They're expensive, and they're largely online, and they're not as transparent in my experience. And that's and there are a lot of other names I could put in there. So I'm not the person you want to talk to about that. Moving forward, toss a wide net in your research. Don't just look in one school. Have many options. Start early. This is you can't start too early, to be honest. Graduate admissions folks are not tolerant of last minute applications or anything late. They just, if it's late, it doesn't exist. Um, you're going to have higher application fees in a college. It's going to be like $100, and you've got to take tests. It's going to take time to get your transcripts and your letters in and things of that sort. So you can't wait until a week before to get this done. I've known people that did, and it was really stupid. So don't wait until the last minute. Very first thing you really need to do is to take the GRE. Okay, and I have a link there to the website for it. Let me tell you about my GRE experience. I took it in 2004, and to get ready to go to graduate school for a PhD program in communication at Georgia State. And I did not do that well on it. I did, of course, okay on the, really well, I guess, for most people on the English part, which I should, and the writing part, and I think that's what got me in the program. But my math was embarrassingly bad. And I had wanted to study, but we had a death in the family the week ahead of time of me taking the test, and I really didn't have good sources, so I was just kind of reading a developmental math book. But I tried. So I took it in 2004, and when I wanted to go back, finally, after I dropped out, and it was several years, I had some health problems, and I really didn't like the program either, to be perfectly honest. I had to take it again. So I've taken the GRE twice in my 50s. Oh, don't do that. And the second time, I got into two sources that I recommend, and there are others, of course, but I swear by these. One is Khan Academy, and where he explains math, and it's great. And there are a lot of other MOOCs and things you can go on now that can help you with math. But you're going to need to redo your math, and you've got to understand that I had not had math for 40 years at that point. So that's a long time. And another would be my GRE tutor. Now, there are other sources you can go to, but those are the two I use to help me get prepared for the GRE. The GRE has 6 sections. 2 of them are math, 2 of them are writing an essay or an argument, and 2 of them are reading and writing kinds of things. So, a critical reading. So, and the math goes up to pre-calculus and trig, which I know nothing about. So I did much better. The second time, I raised my percentile like 30 points, it was still not good, but it was a whole lot better than it was. So I said all that to say that it's really, if you're going to take the GRE, it's expensive. It costs like close to $200. But you will probably need it, and you may want to look in to see if the place that you want to go needs the GRE, but it's good to have it, and you need to prepare for it. Often the required grades on the GRE are not that high, but you do want to do your best. And I took it at the Sylvan Learning Center up in Chattanooga, and you'd have thought I was getting on a plane with a bomb, the way they treated me. They really want their test security to be high, so you have to roll up your pants legs and do all this kind of crazy stuff. Be organized. I have created here sort of a spreadsheet idea where you keep your information and your what you've done straight. This is just an idea. What degree would you get there? What information do you need? The costs, deadlines, etc. So that might be something to use to keep this process straight. Because again, you don't want to just apply to one place. Now we move to the writing assignments that will be important. Obviously, different institutions have different writing requirements. Typically, there might be a letter of introduction or a letter of intent, it's called, to explain. And it's much like a cover letter for a job, but it's going to be a little more academically oriented. You may have to write an essay in response to a prompt. You may have to write a resume or a CV, which I'll get to in a little bit. Others may want a sample of your scholarly writing, especially in a doctoral program, such as a paper that you've written that shows use of sources or original research or something like that, or some other focused example to show your knowledge of writing in that field. Obviously, these are documents that you want to be careful about and proofread. For this assignment, what I ask you to do is the um, more or less the letter of introduction, a cover letter, and a resume, or actually the CV, which is a little bit more than just what a resume would be. So uh, you need to look at the school to which you're applying and see what kinds of documents they want. That's going to be important. If they want an essay in response to some sort of particular prompt, then that's what you will give. Um, Otherwise, I would like you to do the letter of introduction, letter of intent, and the CV. Those would be the two documents that you would do, along with the fact that you're going to write um, an analysis of the graduate school. So why you would go there, what it offers, what programs you would be in, who are their professors, um, with some sources indicated as well. Okay. The letter of application introduction should you need to think of it as a cover letter for employment. It should not be generic. It must be sent to a specific person and be very specific to that program. And just like with a cover letter of employment, you need to focus on what you bring to the program, not just I'm going to come to your school because I'm smart and you have what I want, but what are your strengths going to add to the experiences of the other students? And you might think, well, what does that matter? Well, because your classes are going to be smaller, they want diversity of different things, age, ethnicities, experiences, etc. Um, they and to often you're in a cohort, so your classmates are you're very tied into your classmates and what you're doing. And then what sets you apart academically and professionally? What makes you distinct? And again, what would you bring to the program? What research interests do you have? What are your career goals? Um, is there a specific faculty member that, or aspects of the program that appeal to you and will help you reach your career goals? And what can you say about the reputation of the program without being a kiss up, of course? So these are kinds of questions and issues you want to deal with in the letter of application. It could be longer than your typical cover letter because remember you're making an argument. So if it's a 2-page letter, that's okay. Um, Definitely should cover up the whole page. Now we come to the issue of the CV, and as far as what I've said about resumes in the class, you have more freedom with this document in terms of being able to personalize it and lengthen it. So the old, 1 page for the resume, the CVs are just they're as long as they need to be. On my CV that I have posted there, I have things like my birthplace and family. You probably don't need to do that. It's so you don't have to follow mine slavishly. I put it on mine because of my background, my age, and what I use it for. So, but I would not necessarily say that it's a good idea for you to do that. Your CV is far more complete, whereas a resume is what you're qualified to do in your for work, and why they should hire you. This is going to be on both your work and your academic, and it could have all your jobs you've had. It would have awards, your GPA, presentations outside of classes. For example, if you went to a conference with one of your professors, or you participated in a showcase on campus, organizations that you've belonged to, like Psi Chi fraternities, these kinds of things. These would all be listed, and you would have to have categories. You would want to follow the same idea as a resume in terms of listing your most recent to earlier. It would not be necessary to list your high school. You wouldn't have a college degree if you hadn't graduated high school. You want to make sure it's formatted neatly with the bold and the centering and all those kinds of things. And it is like the resume. It's a document you constantly work on and improve. Every couple months I have to go in and update mine because of presentations I've given or training I've gone through or something. So it's a work in progress all through your professional life. Okay, wisdom 3, a little it's a commercial I'm throwing in here. What about applying for teaching assistant or graduate assistantships? If you can get one and get it, they're great. They're awesome. I had one when I was your age at Ohio University, and it's basically they will use you either to as a teaching assistant to teach a basic freshman course or something like first year experience. Usually, like if you're a communication major, it would be human communication or something like that. Um, or you work with a professor to in various aspects of helping him or her with her classes. And a graduate assistant may work in research, help edit a book, etc. So it's just a great experience. You get to know people, you make connections, you learn a lot. Um, and they give you a small stipend on top of a tuition waiver. So if you can get one, they're competitive, but it's something you want to do. Uh, Doctoral programs use more of them because obviously at that point the applicants are uh, more educated. They have master's degrees and that kinds of things. Um, they do require you to live close to campus. So if you're going to school in Atlanta, like at Georgia State or something, that may not be practical for you to have one there. Applying for it is a different or separate process. Um, so it's two separate things. It's when you apply to go to school there, that doesn't mean you're applying for the assistantship. So it but you might want to think, since they're accepting you to the program, you might want to think about what characteristics these readers who will be on that committee as well would be thinking in terms of a teaching assistant. So if you were to write that you had an interest in teaching, that's good. If you wrote, that you don't see yourself as a teacher, that would probably not be a good thing. Okay. Recommendations. You're going to need 3 letters of reference of some level, either formal or electronic. Only pick people who have knowledge of your scholastic and professional expertise. Don't just pick anybody. Pick those whom you can trust to send a good letter on time, and I cannot emphasize this enough. I hate to say this, but not everyone is reliable in that way. And so you really need to know that it's a person who's going to send the letter in a timely manner, like before the deadline, because you don't want your application to be thrown in the pile because you didn't get your references. Always ask the person first. Never assume someone will be a reference for you. That's the kiss of death. You probably have to give the writer of the recommendation very clear directions on what is needed. I've often been asked to recommend somebody, and then they never tell me what I'm supposed to do. Is there a website? Is there a letter I have to write? Is there a form? Is there a deadline? That kind of thing. So you've got to be, help the people out. They're doing you a big favor. And you're probably going to have to follow up in a way that's not pesky. Because some people just forget. They're not very organized. And college professors sometimes aren't. Some things you can expect. You can expect an interview. You can expect a cohort approach, which means lots of group interaction. That's very popular now, especially in more professional programs. It's cheaper for the university to do a cohort because they let in 24 people in the program. They know exactly what classes those people have to take, when they have to take them, and they just go through lockstep in the program. The good part about it is that it's cheaper for them, and you get lots of group interaction. The bad part is that once you're on that train, you're not getting off. And it's very hard to lay out a semester. Very hard. So, that's once you're in, you're in. That's the way I felt in my doctoral work. It was a cohort. We were very tight. I'll always be friends with these people. But it was like you're on this train, and anybody who dropped out for a semester dropped out permanently. So you don't get that option. There may be some online or hybrid courses. And one thing that you'll find in those is that the discussion boards are extremely important. Your discussion board postings are papers. You have to use sources. You have to respond. You can't just say, oh, yes, I agree. You have to really respond and engage in the discussion boards if you are taking an online graduate school class. It's, like I said, think of your hardest class, undergrad, and multiply it several times. More rigor from day one. It's assumed you are self-directed. If you need help with something, you're going to have to find your own help. Very few tests. You will not take a lot of tests in graduate school. You will have comps at the end, which again is not a Scantron test. It's a lot of writing. If you take a statistics class, which many of you will, you probably have um, test kinds of things. But for the most part, you're going to write a lot. So that's why they want to see your writing. If you don't write clearly, they'll probably not accept you. And you will also be asked from day one what your research agenda is. You don't have to commit yourself, but you are expected to have a specific focus of your research that you're interested in. So, something to think about. And as I said at the end, you'll have comprehensive exams. Whether or not you write a thesis, I would recommend you write a thesis because many times you can't get into a PhD program without one, um, without published writing of that sort, or a large document. And a thesis is not as long as a dissertation, but it is original work. And the comprehensive exams are, uh, well, they're just a lot of exams over, and usually they give you a study guide. I remember I took mine at, I have a master's degree in English from UTC, and I was 8 months pregnant, and it was interesting to do that. So, uh, the interview may be through a Skype kind of thing, but it is like a job interview, so dress like a professionally, um, and that treat it like that. Always do your homework. They will want to know what areas you want to pursue.